Hi, I'm Dahlia. At my sister's birthday, she rubbed cake on my face, called me a clown in front of everyone. People laughed. My own mother did nothing. But that moment wasn't just about cake. It was the tip of something deeper. Years of being erased, silenced, used. They mocked me, cut me out of photos, rewrote my name on contracts, stole my work, and still expected me to smile and serve. But what happens when the one they tried to bury brings the receipts? What happens when silence isn't submission, but preparation? Would you have stayed quiet too? I stood at the edge of the Whitestone Conservatory's marble foyer, the spring light slipping in through gold-trimmed windows. The room felt like a showroom, too polished, too perfect, and I wasn't part of the display. A woman brushed past me in a cloud of floral perfume and impatience, murmuring, "Excuse me," like I dared stand somewhere sacred. I smiled politely and shifted to the side. No one greeted me. No one noticed I had arrived. My heels clicked softly as I approached the check-in table. A young man with a clipboard glanced up and asked, "Name?" "Dahlia," I replied, voice steady. He scanned the list. Then again, maybe under another name?" "No," I said, tighter this time. "Just Dahlia Whitmore." He flipped a few more pages, then gave a tight smile. "You're not listed here. Perhaps someone forgot to—" "It's fine," I interrupted, though my stomach clenched. "I'll just go in." I stepped aside, smoothing the hem of my dress. It was navy, simple, appropriate. Not flashy like the sequined gowns already twirling under chandeliers, but I'd chosen it deliberately, to avoid the usual commentary. Still, it seemed I'd dressed invisible again. I glanced around for a familiar face, but no one looked my way. No one ever did, unless I was handing them something or fixing their collar before a photo. I started to convince myself it was a clerical error, nothing more. Mistakes happen. But the sinking weight in my gut told me otherwise. Without a place card, I wandered toward the buffet. A trio of servers moved like clockwork, setting up shrimp towers and champagne fountains. I lingered near the side, trying not to look lost or, worse, desperate. That's when a woman in black slacks and a headset briskly handed me a tray. "Take this to table 4, will you?" she said without looking up. I blinked. "I think there's been a—" "Thank you," she said, and walked away. Before I could process it, a man in a pale linen blazer pointed at me and chuckled. "Oh, she's with the staff. No wonder she's not seated." I opened my mouth, but the laughter around him swallowed the moment. My cheeks warmed. "Actually," I said calmly, "I'm a guest. But thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, didn't see you on the list." Neither did they. I turned just in time to see Regina glide past in a champagne gown that shimmered with every movement. She looked at me, then the tray still in my hands, and smirked. "Well," she said coolly, "you do blend in." I placed the tray on a side table and smiled, too tightly. "Funny. That's what you said at the last family dinner, right before you cropped me out of the Christmas photo." Regina laughed, not kindly. "You're sensitive today." I watched her float back into her fan circle, her laughter fading into another round of compliments from women who carried handbags that cost more than my rent. I stepped back toward the wall, becoming background again. Cheryl, our mother, stood near the fireplace holding court. She looked regal in silver satin, pearls perfectly placed, her expression composed. She laughed with someone I didn't recognize, a man in a suit I assumed was business, not blood. She glanced at me briefly, then returned to her conversation without missing a beat. Across the room, someone snapped a photo of Regina with her fiancé, the flash catching her jawline just right. I'd taught her that trick: tilt the head slightly down, let the light find you, but they wouldn't remember that. No one asked me to be in a photo. Again. I leaned against a column and thought back to a gala 2 years ago. I'd arrived early to help set up. Regina had given me a list of things to do: florals, guest cards, even arranging the seating. When the event started, I stood by the door waiting for someone to notice I wasn't in any group shots. Later, when I looked through the social media posts, I realized I had been there in every photo, but always in the background, slightly blurred, half-cropped, adjusting someone else's detail. It had become a habit, being helpful, not central, present, but not preserved. The event MC clinked his glass and began introducing family members. And now, he said, scanning a note card. A warm welcome to Regina's lovely younger sister Diane. Dahlia? A few chuckles scattered through the room. Someone near the back said, "Classic mix-up." I smiled faintly and nodded. Happens all the time. Regina didn't correct him. She just grinned. As I walked past a round table, an elderly woman caught my wrist gently. "You're doing a great job tonight, sweetheart. The punch is divine." "Thank you," I said softly. "I'll let the team know." She beamed, satisfied. I made my way toward the restroom, face warm, chest tight. Each footstep echoed a little louder. In the mirror, my lipstick had smudged slightly, and, God, was that frosting on my cheek? When had that happened? Maybe from one of the servers brushing past me. Or had someone done it on purpose? I grabbed a paper towel and wiped it away slowly. It left a faint mark on my cheek, like a fingerprint I hadn't noticed until it stuck. I looked at myself, not just at my face, but into it. I didn't see a victim, but I did see someone being erased. "Today's just starting," I said aloud, voice even. "Let's see what else they forgot." The lights dimmed slightly as the MC stepped up with his practiced smile and cue cards. He clinked his glass with a silver spoon, capturing the attention of the guests who stood chatting by the bar or circling the elaborate dessert table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice full of formal cheer, "we now invite our beloved family members to join Regina for a toast in celebration of her fabulous 35th birthday." A polite applause followed. I didn't move. I hadn't been told there'd be a family toast. I hadn't been told much at all. And so I sat, at a round table near the back of the reception hall, hands folded on my lap, willing my face to stay neutral. The champagne flute in front of me was untouched. Then I heard it. "Dahlia?" Regina's voice, sweet, falsely inviting, called from the stage. She gestured toward me, fingers fluttering like a pageant queen. "There she is," the MC added, chuckling. "Our family's favorite helper." My body stiffened, but I stood. I walked toward the front, aware of how the crowd parted, how heads turned just slightly slower than polite. My sister's smile widened as I reached the dais. She took my hand lightly, as though lifting a prop. "This one," Regina said into the mic, "has always been behind the scenes, truly the best kind of support system a girl can have. Quiet, efficient, always there, even when she's not on the guest list." The audience laughed. I laughed too, quietly. I had to. Standing beside her, I watched Cheryl, our mother, stand in the front row, arms folded, beaming with pride. But not at me. "I couldn't have pulled this off without you," Regina continued, squeezing my arm. "You should have seen her earlier, fixing the table settings, rearranging candles. Some of us are just born for backstage magic." It was a compliment laced with barbed wire. The applause was warm, but not for me. As I stepped off stage, a waiter wheeled in a towering cake, sparklers dancing like wildfire. It was extravagant, overdone, like everything Regina planned. The room hushed in anticipation. The MC raised his voice again. "Now, let's cut the cake." Regina's eyes locked with mine. "Dahlia," she said sweetly, "since you've always been so good at service, why don't you help me slice this beauty?" Laughter bubbled from a few corners of the room. I nodded, stepping forward. My hand reached out toward the knife laid neatly beside the cake stand. And then I felt it. A cold, sticky smear across my cheek. Frosting. Thick and sweet and sudden. I froze. She had taken a handful of icing and planted it right on my face. The laughter exploded. Real, raw, unfiltered. Gasps followed by applause, some guests slapping the backs of their friends, others raising their phones. A voice rang out from the back, male, maybe from her fiancé's side of the family. "She's the birthday clown now." I stood still, hands trembling at my sides, frosting sliding slowly down my jaw. Regina turned back to the crowd, laughing harder than anyone else. She always knew how to commit to a bit. No one stopped it. No one said anything. It was a joke, after all. Inside, something cracked. I didn't know whether it was my pride, my composure, or just the last thread I'd been clinging to. But I felt it, loud and sharp. The crowd kept chuckling. I heard whispers. It's all in good fun. She took it well. God, Regina's hilarious. I didn't move. Instead, I stared at Regina. At her glittering eyes, her perfect cheekbones, the slight tilt of her head that masked cruelty as charisma. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She had already turned back to the crowd, soaking in the moment. I stood alone, center stage, frosting on my face. My eyes scanned the room. Cheryl sipped from her champagne glass, expression unreadable, but she wasn't shocked. Of course not. I wiped my cheeks slowly, carefully, making sure the gesture didn't look frantic. The room began to shift again. Music resumed, chatter picked up. The moment was over for them, but not for me. I stepped down without speaking and returned to my table. My chair felt colder than it had 20 minutes ago. The laughter still echoed in corners of the hall. I caught someone glancing at me, then quickly looking away. A young server approached cautiously, his tray slightly trembling. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, too smoothly. "Don't worry." His eyes lingered for half a second, not out of pity, out of discomfort. He nodded and left. Across the room, I heard one woman murmur, "That went a little far, didn't it?" Her friend whispered something back. I didn't care what. At least one person noticed. A familiar voice floated past as Cheryl walked by my table. "You handled that with grace," she said, almost as if rehearsed. "I'm proud of you for taking it well." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I looked up and said evenly, "It's what I do best." She patted my shoulder, then disappeared into a crowd of donors and family friends. I sat there a moment longer. Breathe in, breathe out. This wasn't new. It wasn't even the worst. But tonight, something felt different. Not because they had crossed a line, but because I finally felt the urge to draw one. The restroom smelled faintly of lemon and gardenia, too clean for what I felt. I stood in front of the mirror under soft gold lights, smudging the last of the frosting off my cheek. The napkin in my hand was ruined, soaked and crumpled, much like the version of myself I'd walked in here with. I tried not to shake, but my hand didn't listen. I kept telling myself it was just a joke, one of Regina's performances, dramatic and overdone. But the laughter still rang in my ears like someone had left the volume up on my humiliation. I checked my phone. Nothing. No messages, no missed calls, no, "Are you okay?" from Cheryl. Certainly not from Regina. Even silence, when it's expected, can land like a slap. I locked the screen, set the phone on the counter, and stared at my reflection again. My eyes looked tired, not from the frosting or the makeup or the effort to seem unaffected, but from years of pretending things didn't matter when they always did. The door creaked open. A teenage girl, maybe 13, stepped in and caught my eye. She looked at me for a second, just long enough, and then walked out without saying a word. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't have known what to say to me either. I whispered under my breath, "That's how invisibility works." Seen, but not really. My gaze returned to the mirror. I remembered a quote from a book I'd underlined once. "Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who claps when you rise." That line had felt poetic then. Now it felt precise. I thought of Cheryl's face during the cake stunt, how her lips curved slightly like she'd just tasted something sweet. I knew that smirk. It wasn't amusement. It was satisfaction. There was a time I convinced myself she just didn't know any better, that she simply wasn't wired for sentiment. But watching her expression that night, I realized it wasn't lack of awareness, it was intent, and it had always been. As I stood drying my hands, a different memory surfaced, one I hadn't recalled in years. It was of a holiday card. I had been 19. They'd sent it out to friends and extended family. A picture-perfect scene in matching sweaters, all gathered around the fireplace. All of them, except me. At the time, Cheryl had explained it was an old photo, chosen because the lighting was better. I'd laughed, nodded, believed her. Maybe because it was easier than asking why my existence didn't fit the frame. But the cards that followed, year after year, they all had one thing in common. Regina front and center. I was never included again, not even as a shadow in the background. Back then, Cheryl said something that lodged itself in my spine like ice. You're the type of person who thrives in the background, Dahlia. Not everyone wants the spotlight. She said it with such calm certainty, as if offering me a gift. I accepted it like one. I wore it like a uniform. Now, standing in the aftermath of more of the same, I felt that sentence rearing back to life, and I finally understood its weight. It wasn't a compliment, it was permission to be erased. I left the restroom and headed toward the side gallery, where a looped montage of Regina's life played on a projector screen. The hallway was quiet. Guests were mostly outside now, sipping drinks and clapping for the string quartet. Inside, the room echoed with soft piano music and the ticking of well-planned nostalgia. I stopped in the shadows and watched the screen. Regina as a baby, swaddled in designer blankets. Regina's first dance recital, her awkward legs and forced smile. Then college graduation, a marketing award, Cheryl hugging her in various decades of dresses. Their memories, curated like an exhibit. And then came a clip I hadn't expected. My father, Brenda, sitting on a sunlit bench, speaking into the camera. "She's the best thing we ever did," he said. The screen cut to black. My breath hitched. He didn't mean me. There was no mention of me, no shared memory, no nod, no both girls. Just one. Always just one. My father had been a quiet man, but silence isn't neutral. It's a language, and that sentence was loud enough to split me open. I turned away from the screen. My throat burned. I wasn't going to cry. Not here, not again. I needed air. I needed space where my name didn't evaporate when spoken. The garden path outside was dimly lit with hanging bulbs and flickering candles set into antique lanterns. A few guests were still mingling in corners, but I kept walking until the murmurs faded. I found a bench beneath a sycamore tree and sat down. The phone came back out, but not for distractions. Not this time. I opened the Notes app and stared at the blank screen. Then I started typing. The time I took him to chemo and waited in the car because Regina had a lunch meeting. The photo I shot of him for his law firm's anniversary, the one they used on the brochure without credit. The night I stayed up scanning family albums because Cheryl needed digital copies for her speech. Each line typed in silence, each memory I held that no one else wanted, the things they forgot because it was convenient or because it didn't star the right daughter. I titled the note, "What They Forgot to Mention," not out of spite, not even for revenge, but because I needed a place where I existed fully, where I didn't have to explain why my name belonged on the list, why my voice deserved a mic. I sat there longer than I meant to, letting the sound of crickets and wind fill the space I'd carved out from their curated perfection. I wasn't planning anything, but something had started. I left the garden once the crowd thinned, my chest tight with everything unspoken. The further I walked from the glow of lanterns and laughter, the more I needed the silence of cold tile and white walls. I stepped back into the hallway near the staff area under the pretense of freshening up again, but really, I needed to breathe, alone, unjudged, untouched. I set my phone on the restroom counter, unaware that my fingers had accidentally opened the voice recorder. It lit up quietly, as if it too was tired of being ignored. I didn't notice the red glow until I heard familiar voices from just outside the restroom door. Two women, one of them unmistakably Regina. "She just makes me look more impressive," she said with a smirk in her tone. I froze mid-step, my hand still damp from the sink. "Come on," the second voice laughed. "You really think she'd show up if Mom hadn't told her she'd look heartless not inviting you?" "No chance. I let her come because Mom said it'd be bad optics otherwise. Can you imagine the press finding out I didn't invite my own sister?" Regina's laugh was sharp, rehearsed. Their heels clicked away on the marble floor like punctuation marks. I didn't follow them. I didn't say a word. I didn't even breathe. Instead, I reached for my phone and stared at the screen. Recording saved. That clip, raw, clear, ugly, was now mine. I stared into the mirror and whispered to myself, "You can't plead ignorance when the truth is on tape." Moments later, I walked back down the hallway toward the main reception. Something in me had shifted, not like a breaking point, but like a turning key. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. But I moved differently now, with a purpose even I hadn't felt in years. Passing by the registration table, I paused. No one manned the check-in anymore. The chaos of the evening had consumed all order. I opened the binder myself and flipped through the pages. And there it was, my name. Dahlia Whitmore, optional. Handwritten, slanted script, no RSVP box, no +1, just me, as an afterthought. 2 days before, I'd received the invite by email. No call, no personal note, no looking forward to seeing you. Back then, I'd told myself it was last-minute planning. Now, I knew better. A staff member, probably no older than 20, passed by with a clipboard. I stopped him gently. "Can you tell me who submitted the latest guest list edits?" I asked. He flipped through the attached notes. "It came from Regina's assistant. Wednesday night, I think." I nodded. That's all I needed. The words, "optional people don't make the final cut," echoed in my chest like a bell. I didn't say it aloud this time. I didn't need to. I made my way back outside to the garden, the air colder now as the sun dipped below the treetops. The lanterns above flickered, casting shadows over satin dresses and polished shoes. Music still played softly, but I could barely hear it over my thoughts. I found Cheryl near the dessert station, chatting with one of Regina's college friends. Her posture was perfect, a glass of Prosecco balanced between manicured fingers. She smiled like nothing could crack her. I waited until her companion walked away, then stepped closer. "Did you know they marked me as optional?" I asked. Her smile didn't drop, but her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" she replied. "On the guest list, handwritten, optional." She took a slow sip of her drink. "Dahlia, it's a detail, nothing more." "And the audio?" I pressed, quiet but firm. "You didn't hear what she said outside the restroom? That I make her look more impressive? That you told her it'd be bad PR not to invite me?" She blinked, but didn't flinch. "This is Regina's night. Let's not make it about you." I laughed under my breath. Not bitter, just tired. "You've said that line so many times, it's probably engraved on a serving tray somewhere." She set her glass down with a little too much care. "You're not being fair." "Neither are you," I said, and stepped forward, just enough that she couldn't brush me aside this time. "I hope you're proud of the legacy you're leaving, because I'm done pretending it doesn't exist." Cheryl didn't reply, but her jaw clenched, and that was enough. I walked away with my head held higher than it had been all evening. The phone in my purse now carried more weight than anyone in that room imagined, not because it had evidence, but because it had clarity. I renamed the recording in a new folder. Their words. Inside, the staff began setting up for the final slideshow presentation. The stage was being cleared, guests herded to their seats. The air shifted with anticipation. Through the large windows, I could see the floral arches and ornate screens that framed the ballroom stage. They'd spared no expense: white roses, crystal-draped pedestals, custom lighting that washed everything in a soft, forgiving glow. It was a perfect stage for a perfect story. But as I stood on the outside looking in, that perfection began to crumble. "There's a difference between being quiet and being silenced," I murmured, watching them move like characters in someone else's script. I pulled my phone again and played the clip once more. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed to feel the weight of it, the confirmation that I hadn't imagined any of this. Regina's voice played again. "She just makes me look more impressive." This time, I didn't flinch. "For years, I let them narrate my story," I whispered. "This time, I'll bring my own voice to the table." The file closed. The screen dimmed. The last thought before I turned toward the ballroom was simple. They thought they were preparing a party. I was preparing a reckoning. Just before dinner, the sky over the conservatory deepened into that soft blue where daylight and dusk wrestle for control. The hanging lights above the garden seating flickered on one by one. Guests buzzed near the cocktail bar, laughter bubbling higher with every poured drink. Regina's voice floated across the lawn, amplified by the mic in her hand. "All right, everyone," she called out. "Let's have a little fun before dinner. We're going to play a quick family roast game. Nothing too serious, I promise." That word, roast, made my stomach tighten. I stayed where I was, seated at the table they'd placed near the perimeter, like I was some sort of placeholder. I noticed the servers bringing over stacks of cards and passing them around to each table. A guest next to me smiled and handed me one. "Don't worry, it's harmless," she said. I looked down at my card. It read, "What's one thing you'd never ask your sister to help with?" I exhaled, feeling the twist in my gut spread. Someone else might have laughed. Someone else might have shrugged. I glanced up just as Regina read hers aloud. "What would I never ask my sister to help with?" She looked right at me, her smile as smooth as the pearls on her wrist. "Anything that involves style, grace, or social skills." She laughed. The crowd joined in. Someone even clapped. I froze for a moment, just long enough to let the burn settle. Then I stood. "I suppose," I said evenly, reaching for the mic, "that's why you need assistance for authenticity." The laughter stopped. It didn't taper. It stopped. A few guests shifted in their seats. Regina's smile dropped just enough to be noticed. I handed the mic back and returned to my seat. No one said a word. I didn't need them to. Later, as the sun slipped below the trees, I wandered past the decorative memory display set up along the garden walkway. Easels held framed photos of Regina from birth to adulthood. Baby footprints, college graduation caps, startup launch photos, magazine covers, every frame carefully curated to present a life of polished success. Then I stopped cold. Encased in glass beneath soft lighting was a gold-trimmed frame holding a legal document. The caption read, "Founding co-signee, Regina Whitmore." My breath caught. I knew that paper. It was the partnership contract for a digital art licensing platform, something our father had helped me start in 2016. I'd signed it. I remembered the ink on my fingers, the excitement in my chest. We were co-signers. But now, my name was gone. Replaced. The document bore only Regina's. I stared at it, unblinking. 1,000 images flashed through my mind. Nights working on pitch decks, the initial user interface design, the late calls with developers. I had poured pieces of myself into that platform. It was the first time Dad had treated one of my ideas like something real. And now, my name wasn't even a footnote. I scanned the room. No one was paying attention to the display. They were busy taking selfies by the champagne wall. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the document. I found Cheryl near the rear of the event tent, deep in conversation with someone from the foundation board. I waited until they were done. "Can we talk?" I asked. She nodded, stepping aside into a quieter space behind the fabric partition. I didn't waste time. "Did you switch that contract?" Cheryl's face hardened instantly. "You signed your rights away years ago," she said without pause. "That's not betrayal. That's smart strategy." I stared at her. I didn't know what I was giving up. "You told me Regina needed the spotlight, that the optics would work better." "You agreed." "I trusted you," I said. "That's not the same." Cheryl raised her chin. "Everything Regina has, she's earned." I blinked slowly, the heat in my chest rising but contained. "Then why does she have to erase me to shine?" She didn't respond. Her silence said enough. I turned and walked away, not with drama, not with tears. I wasn't performing. I was done performing. This wasn't family. It was a cover story, and I'd finally flipped to the page they didn't expect me to read aloud. Back near the bar, I found a quiet seat at the edge of the garden. I opened my phone and drafted a message. Subject line, "Need a quick favor. Can you check something for me? I need to confirm authorship on a 2016 partnership doc. Attached is a photo." I sent it to my old law school friend who now specialized in intellectual property. Then, I opened my texts and typed, "To Hope, I may need your tech skills tonight. Let's talk before dessert." My thumb hovered for a second before I hit send. I stared at the screen for a beat longer, then opened my voice memo app. I didn't speak yet. I just sat with the idea of what it meant to finally make noise, not in anger, but with purpose. You don't make noise to get even. You make noise so they can't ignore you anymore. For years, I had swallowed words, eaten shame like it was served with silverware, and smiled through every slight. But something had shifted. I wasn't raging. I was remembering. And more importantly, I was documenting. Regina stood beneath the chandelier again, raising her champagne glass like a queen about to christen a ship. Her voice rang smooth as silk, too polished to be real. "Before we sit down to dinner," she began, "I want to thank a few special people who made tonight what it is." I knew the script. I'd heard versions of it at every fundraiser, every gallery show, every public event she hosted where appearances mattered more than truth. She gestured toward me with her flute. And of course, my sister Dahlia, always so supportive, even if she's not exactly the spotlight type. A few guests chuckled politely. I stood, walked up to the stage because I was expected to, not because I wanted to. I could feel every eye on me, but not in admiration, more like curiosity, like I was an unexpected animal let loose in their curated zoo. Regina reached out with a smile too wide, her arm looping through mine just long enough to feel possessive. She offered me the mic, but I declined with a shake of my head and a tight-lipped smile. I didn't need a stage to speak, not yet. I turned and walked back to my seat, the applause already tapering off. Her compliment hadn't been real. It was performance wrapped in condescension. I could almost hear the subtext. "She's harmless. Look how gracious she is even now." They mistook grace for surrender. Not today. The lights dimmed. The house pianist paused. All attention shifted to the projection screen behind Regina as a title card faded in. Regina through the years. A slideshow began. Soft music, curated laughter, camera pans of baby photos, ballet recitals, prom dresses, corporate panels. And then, like a slap, the screen flickered to a grainy clip from a camcorder. A little girl, me, dressed as a clown, oversized red nose and painted cheeks, dancing awkwardly at a backyard party. Regina's 7th birthday. I froze. The footage played longer than it should have. My oversized shoes tripped once. I caught myself, looked to the side of the screen, my face painted with exaggerated joy. But I remembered that day. The makeup stung, the wig itched. I hadn't been invited to the party until Cheryl suggested I earn it by entertaining the other kids. Someone in the crowd chuckled. "She's always been the funny one." Regina turned to the audience. She was so committed to the role. Laughter rippled through the room. Not mean-spirited, worse. It was casual, normalized, accepted. I stared at the screen, my fingers curling against the edge of the tablecloth. Not one person around me noticed the humiliation thick in my silence. They had edited out the part where I cried in the bathroom, scrubbing paint off with paper towels until my skin turned red. They edited out the part where Cheryl said, "Well, it's not like anyone forced you." No one seemed to wonder why I'd worn that costume. They just saw a girl willing to make a fool of herself for the chance to be included. And once again, they applauded. As the slideshow ended, the lights came back up and the MC took the mic. "What a journey," he beamed. "Now let's recognize a few generous contributors to tonight's celebration." He gestured to the side of the stage where a staff member rolled out a covered easel. "This piece," the MC continued, "was gifted by Regina's dearest friend, Marcia, a symbol of enduring support and creativity." The cloth was pulled back. A large abstract painting, deep violet, sweeping charcoal strokes, a hint of gold woven through. My chest tightened. That was my painting. I had commissioned it 2 months ago. I'd picked the artist, paid the deposit. I'd planned to gift it to Regina, part of me still trying to be something, present, meaningful. Now it had someone else's name on it. I stood slowly, not feeling my legs. I walked toward the side of the room where the MC's assistant stood checking a clipboard. "Excuse me," I asked, keeping my tone even. "That painting, was it listed under Marcia's name?" He glanced down. "Yup. Says here Marcia T. gifted via Cheryl. Is there a problem?" I smiled thinly. "No, just clarifying." Flashback struck like a flashbulb. 2 weeks ago, I'd shown Cheryl the invoice. She'd looked it over and said, "Don't put your name on things, Dahlia. It's tacky. Just let her enjoy the gift." Now I understood. It wasn't about elegance. It was erasure. I turned away and made my way back toward my table, but I didn't sit. Hope was at the adjacent table, seated between two acquaintances from Regina's PR firm. She saw me standing and raised an eyebrow. I walked toward her and leaned in slightly. "Let's meet by the AV booth in 5. Her expression shifted immediately. She nodded once. Back at my seat, I picked up my purse and casually checked inside. The USB was still there, tucked beneath a packet of tissues and a lipstick I hadn't reapplied since the clown clip. I looked around. The room was laughing again, drinks flowing, the roast game a distant memory now. But something in me had shifted again, this time from anger to something sharper, intent. They thought this was their closing act, that the party was winding down in the warm glow of shared nostalgia. But I hadn't performed my final scene. There's more than one way to go out with grace. Mine included receipts. The hallway behind the ballroom smelled faintly of citrus and freshly printed programs. I stood just outside the AV booth, watching the tech team run their final checks, voices low but efficient. Hope leaned against the wall across from me, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Dahlia," she said plainly, "what do you need me to do?" I handed her the USB from my purse, fingers steady. "Make sure it plays. No glitches. No chance to cut it off midstream." She nodded and plugged it into her laptop without another word. As the files loaded, she paused. "There's a media folder in here. Did you know you had a hidden clip in it?" I blinked. "What clip?" She clicked it open. The video was barely 30 seconds long, an over-the-shoulder shot of Regina talking to someone dressed like a lifestyle influencer. Her voice, crisp and confident, carried clearly. "She's dead weight. I keep her in photos, so no one says I abandoned family." Hope turned to me, slow and careful. "Do you want to start with this?" I didn't hesitate. "We start with that." 5 minutes later, Hope received a ping on her phone, a message from a contact in the PR firm Regina had hired for the event. She tilted the screen toward me. "You're gonna want to see this." Subject line: Need Dahlia off main shot angles. Backup photographer list below. I scrolled. Regina's team had submitted a request to ensure I wasn't visible in any official press materials. Underneath, another bullet point read, "Use for authenticity, diversity value, only if needed." I felt the air punch out of my lungs, not just invisible, but weaponized as a prop. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a branding tool, deployed and hidden at convenience. Hope's voice was low but certain. "Do you want it in the package?" "Yes," I said. "Top of the playlist. Name the folder. Unscripted." She nodded. "You sure about this?" I nodded once. I'm past the point of hoping they'll do the right thing. We sat in silence for a beat, the kind that settles between women who finally stopped giving the benefit of the doubt. Hope handed off a flash drive to the tech manager, telling him it was the tribute reel requested by Regina's assistant. She even wore a name tag she'd pulled off a catering intern earlier, just to blend in. Meanwhile, I walked the ballroom perimeter. Not fast, not sneaky, just slow enough to observe. Regina stood by the head table, posing with a local news anchor. She laughed, touched the woman's arm, tossed her hair just so. Cheryl hovered nearby, speaking to the family attorney. That's when she spotted me. "Still walking around like you belong here?" Cheryl said quietly, stopping just short of confrontation. "Don't worry," I replied, voice even. "I won't interrupt the fantasy." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time that evening, she looked unsure. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I smiled, just a little. Let them think I was shrinking back. Let them enjoy their perfect lighting and curated guest list. Because they were about to learn that I hadn't just come for the cake and humiliation. I'd come with their own words. Regina's voice bounced across the room, the familiar clink of a glass drawing everyone's attention. "Dinner is about to begin," she said, glowing in her seat. "But before we indulge, I have one more surprise planned, a little tribute from someone close." The MC took over, beaming. "Indeed. Before our beautiful evening continues, we'd like to share a brief video, a celebration of family, of legacy, of love." Hope passed by my table on her way to the back. No words, just a nod. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The lights dimmed. Conversations hushed. A few guests turned in their seats. The screen glowed to life. They thought I came unarmed. but I came with every word they said when they thought I wasn't listening. The MC returned to the center of the ballroom with his signature showman smile and a fresh glass of champagne. He tapped the side with his ring finger until the room began to hush. The clinking echoed across the parquet floor and underneath the dome of string lights, now glowing fully as dusk settled beyond the glass walls. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice lifted, "before we bring out dinner, we have one final surprise, a special tribute video crafted with love by someone very close to the family." I didn't move, didn't flinch. I stayed seated, my napkin clutched between two fingers, not as armor, not as a nervous tick, just to keep my hands from shaking. At the next table, Cheryl turned toward Regina and whispered something too soft for the room to hear, but I caught the body language. Regina furrowed her brows. "I didn't plan a tribute," she whispered back. Hope, from her position at the AV booth, gave the nod. The tech guy raised his hand. Confirmation received. The USB we'd handed off was already queued up, labeled simply Family Legacy. The lights dimmed. A hush fell. They always expected me to be the one who'd stay quiet, I thought, even as the screen flickered to life. That's why they never saw this coming. The first clip opened on a split screen. Left. Regina seated on a velvet couch, speaking candidly to someone off camera. Lighting too controlled for it to be accidental. Her tone casual, almost bored. "She's dead weight," she said. "I keep her in shots so no one says I abandoned family. Looks better. Optics." Right. Text in bold white letters. Timestamped. Captured March 9th, 3:12 p.m. Influencer interview outtake. Gasps erupted. Real ones. Audible, unscripted. A man in the back muttered, "Jesus." A woman near the center of the room covered her mouth. Before anyone could process, the next clip played. An email screenshot, Cheryl Whitmore, subject line, Re-Family Event Strategy. The body text said, "Please ensure Dahlia is not in any front-facing media. Use for authenticity, diversity value, only if absolutely necessary." Another gasp. A ripple. The music, previously underscoring every clip with sweet nostalgia, had cut out entirely. What filled the silence now were shifting chairs, murmurs, a metallic clink as someone's fork fell. My name, my existence, filtered down to optics. The video faded to black. Then it picked back up, an edited version of the slideshow Regina had shown earlier, but this one was mine. Side-by-side frames. The clown clip, me at 7 years old with a red nose and oversized shoes, next to a snapshot of a watercolor piece I'd painted that now hung in Regina's office lobby, attributed to artist unknown. Next, the partnership document, my signature faint in the corner, layered with the newer version that listed Regina as sole co-founder. Each frame exposed a new layer of the truth. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had rewritten me out. Guests began murmuring, louder now. One woman stood up abruptly and walked out. A man turned to his wife and asked, wasn't she the one who designed Regina's first brand identity? In the corner, Tatiana, the journalist I hadn't seen earlier, lifted her phone and started recording. Regina stood up halfway through the third segment, her face pale, her jaw tight. "Turn it off!" she barked, motioning toward the booth. "Turn that damn thing off!" The tech guy didn't flinch. "It's automated," he said flatly. "Can't stop it." Hope stood near him, arms crossed. Regina turned toward Cheryl, who was already halfway standing, eyes wide but unsure of which direction to move in. "Do something," Regina hissed, but Cheryl didn't move. Her gaze had shifted to the screen, now displaying a final message typed in soft gray on a black background. "Family is not what you say. It's what you do when no one's watching." Silence. The lights returned. I stood, not to speak, not to explain, just to walk toward the stage and stand beneath the screen, facing the room. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I existed, fully, unapologetically. Someone clapped. It was tentative. Then someone else joined. Then more. It wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. It was enough. They built a show to erase me. I rewrote it with their own script. The lights snapped back on like a slap to the face. In an instant, the entire ballroom transformed from a curated celebration into a gallery of stunned, pale expressions. No music played, no one moved. Forks rested mid-air, untouched appetizers forgotten. Plates remained full, but the hunger had shifted. Regina sat frozen in her seat, lips slightly parted, her perfectly applied lip gloss reflecting the harsh white ceiling lights. Her fiancé, Jasper, leaned forward as if to whisper something to her, but then hesitated, his hand retreating. Cheryl, seated just beside them, muttered something under her breath, her eyes darting across the room as if scanning for exits. Not doors, but social ones. And I? I stood where I had remained throughout the entire clip, centered, calm, grounded in the silence I had prepared. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt final and necessary. No one clapped. No one dared. Some guests, wide-eyed and awkward, began to gather their things. A woman with pearl earrings leaned over to her husband. "That was brutal," she whispered, "but necessary." I watched Regina try to compose herself, her hand slowly curling around the base of her wine glass. Her breathing was shallow, measured. Cheryl reached over, squeezed her daughter's arm, then let go, eyes sharp but unsure. This wasn't damage control. This was exposure. And exposure has no script. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I made my way to the side of the room, away from the noise that hadn't quite started but would surely roar by morning. Tatiana found me before I could slip away. She wore a blazer with her press badge tucked just out of view, likely to blend in. "I'm Tatiana Moore," she said, tone low. "Freelance with several outlets, but mostly doing pieces for the Ledger these days." I nodded, not quite smiling. "I don't need a statement," she added quickly. "I just want to say, it's already online. Clips from phones." Someone at Table 9 livestreamed the whole thing. I inhaled slowly. They're watching it? Watching it, quoting it, tagging it, and not just the clip, your name. She tilted her phone toward me. A hashtag pulsed on screen. Hashtag Dahlia said it. I blinked. Tatiana's eyes softened. "You just made a lot of people reconsider who they stand beside." I paused, uncertain. Are they seeing it as truth or as drama? She didn't flinch. Both. That's how it starts. But here's the difference. This time, they're talking about you, not the version they created. You. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Tatiana handed me her card. "If you ever want your side told fully, your words, not theirs, I'll be listening." Then she walked away, leaving me holding more than just cardstock. I slipped out of the ballroom toward the back hallway, the air cooler there, shadows stretching longer under exit signs. I needed to breathe in something that hadn't been filtered through expectation. Near the side wall, curled in her usual sleepy posture, was Poppy, Regina's dog, though the truth of that label had always been fuzzy. Regina had paraded her around during cocktail hour like a fashion accessory, complete with a tiny pearl-studded collar. But now, as the party unraveled, Poppy lay quietly, tail twitching, ears alert. When she saw me, she perked up and trotted over, not to Regina, who was still frozen inside, but to me. She nudged my leg, licked my hand, then sat by my feet. For a moment, I just stared at her. The way she leaned into my shin like a toddler anchoring themselves to a parent. The way she didn't need words to say what she remembered. I'd taken care of her when she was sick. Regina hadn't even been home. Cheryl stepped out into the hallway just in time to see Poppy resting against me. Her face changed, slightly, but unmistakably. She turned and walked the other way. "At least one being here remembered," I murmured, scratching gently behind Poppy's ear. Inside the ballroom, the murmur became noise again. Questions spilled out louder now, the dam of politeness cracked and crumbling. "So the charity photo, that was staged. Was any of the branding even hers? She used her sister to climb and cut her off once she was done." Regina tried to stand. "None of that was supposed to." But another voice cut her off. "You built a brand on a ghost," someone said flatly. "And now she's real." Cheryl tried to rise to her daughter's defense, but each step forward only deepened the hole. She's always been dramatic, she insisted. We've tried to help her, but she's difficult. But no one listened. The narrative had shifted, and control was not something they could wrestle back. I didn't engage, I didn't speak. I walked out to the garden again, this time slower, more present. Let them chase the pieces inside. Let them patch stories together. I had nothing left to clean up. The string lights still twinkled, the air smelled of lavender and citrus, and for the first time all evening, I exhaled fully. It wasn't revenge, it was release. And what fell tonight, none of it was mine to carry anymore. As I reached the edge of the garden, where the lights gave way to moonlight and shadows, a phrase echoed in my head, soft but certain. Let it fall. I stepped outside just as the noise from inside the ballroom began to shift. Not fade, just shift, from structured chatter and stage-managed laughter to raw, unscripted murmurs. The kind that sounded like trouble, the kind that always followed truth. The valet area was half-lit and tense. Regina stood near the edge of the circle, surrounded not by fans, but by her own team. Her PR manager, one of her assistants, and a woman who I recognized as someone from the foundation board. All of them talking at once, no one listening. Her posture was rigid, lips pressed so tightly together they nearly disappeared. I passed just close enough to hear her snap. Tell them it's not real. Tell them she edited it. The PR woman responded without looking up from her phone. It's everywhere, Regina. There's already 3 screen-recorded versions, hashtags trending. Local news is pulling footage. You can't stop this. Cheryl stood off to the side, phone to her ear, pacing slowly. Her voice was sharp, low, firm. She was trying to call in favors, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. I caught a snatch of her conversation. We can't afford to pull the plug on the sponsorship now, not after... A pause, then a voice on the other end, audible even from where I stood. We can't afford association anymore. I didn't need to hear the rest. I kept walking, silent. What they protected was never their name, it was always their illusion. My ride hadn't arrived yet. I stood near the curb, watching guests exit in waves, their expressions unreadable or carefully neutral. The ones who used to hug Regina like royalty now avoided eye contact altogether. I let it wash over me like wind, there, but passing. A man in a slate-gray suit approached from the shadows just beside the valet desk. He wasn't part of the event team, but he moved with the ease of someone used to big rooms. "Excuse me," he said with a soft smile. "Dahlia?" I turned toward him slowly, wary but calm. "Yes?" He extended a hand, firm but gentle. "Jordan Vega. I'm a partner at Echelon Creative. We're based in LA but work with some cross-coast campaigns. You don't know me, but I've known your work for a while." "My work?" I asked, confused. 2 years ago, he said, you did a temporary installation in Brooklyn, a cityscape built from discarded materials. I saw it while visiting a gallery on Dean Street. I asked who made it, but the gallery didn't have a name listed, said it came anonymously through a contact. But I remember the texture, the detail. There was pain in it, precision. I froze. That piece had been mine. I never claimed it publicly. "How did you know it was me?" He smiled. "I look for the invisible ones. They usually say the truest things." The silence stretched, not awkward, just full. He pulled a card from his coat pocket. "We'd love to talk about a campaign next quarter. Something real. If you're open." I took the card, fingers steady. Recognition means more when it isn't begged for. He nodded once, respectful, and walked back into the night without waiting for anything more. My phone buzzed. "Hope, you okay?" They're scrambling inside. "Also, you're a trending topic now." I opened Twitter. There it was. #family facade. Dahlia speaks. When? The quiet one talks. Mentions flooded in. Comments, reposts, opinion threads. Some critics, of course. A few questioned motives, but the overwhelming tone was different. Watching that video gave me goosebumps. That woman had receipts, courage, and calm. That moment she just stood there while her whole family crumbled? Iconic. Years of being the afterthought, and then she burned the whole table down, with evidence. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't explain. I just saved one post to my favorites. Sometimes strength isn't loud. It's showing up when they expected silence. And pressing play. I exhaled and leaned back into the seat of the Uber that had just arrived. As the car pulled away from Whitestone, I didn't look back. Not once. My phone buzzed again. Hope. You're a damn legend. Me. I didn't burn it down. I just left the door open and walked out. Outside the window, the lights of the conservatory faded. I let them. I scrolled through my camera roll, stopping on the photo of the contract I'd taken. Then over to Jordan's card. I held it, not with hunger, not with desperation, but with curiosity. Let's see what happens next. What I lost tonight, I never had. What I gained, I built with truth. Morning light crept into my apartment through the half-closed blinds, casting warm lines across the floor and up the cabinets. I hadn't slept deeply, but I hadn't tossed either. My body felt heavy, not from exhaustion, but from release, as if something I had been bracing against for years had finally moved through me. The Uber ride home had been silent. No music, no small talk from the driver. Just me in the back seat, staring out the window, hands still trembling from the high-stakes calm I'd held for the last few hours. But even as my fingers shook, my chest stayed steady. There was a calm blooming there, slow, unbothered, unfamiliar. I hadn't checked social media again, not because I was afraid, but because the silence after telling the truth tasted better than the noise that had always followed a lie. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, flipped the switch on my coffee maker, and cracked open the window just enough to feel the breeze. Brooklyn moved outside at its usual hum, trucks groaning down the street, someone yelling about a parking ticket, a dog barking half-heartedly from somewhere below. I didn't just walk away, I murmured to no one. I walked out clean. I let myself replay some of the moments from the night before, not with regret, but with a strange sense of observation, as if I were watching someone else's life from a comfortable distance. Regina's pale face when the clip played, Cheryl's rigid silence, the applause that began with one stranger's hand and built like a rising tide. I hadn't cried. I still didn't feel like I needed to. That was new. Later that morning, as I stepped out to take out the trash, I passed a young boy holding a red balloon, leftover from some event in the building, maybe a neighbor's birthday. He looked about 7, the same age I was in that damn clown video. He tugged gently at the hem of my sweater as I walked past. "Are you really a clown?" he asked, eyes wide and completely serious. "You were on the screen." I blinked, caught between laughing and tearing up. I crouched down, looked him straight in the eye. "I used to be what they said I was," I told him. "Now I just am." He nodded, content with that answer, and skipped away. No judgment, no second glance, just a question, and the simplicity of a child's acceptance. Sometimes the ones who don't know you tell the hardest truths. Back inside, the coffee was ready. I sat at my small kitchen table, wrapped in the robe I'd worn since sunrise, clutching a ceramic mug from my father's old office. It had a chipped handle and the words, "Law is logic," printed in faded serif font. I traced the rim with my thumb, breathing in the aroma. "He may not have seen me," I whispered, "but I still came from him." My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it, expecting more news coverage, but it was something else. An email. Subject: "You always had it." It was from my old college mentor, Professor Branson. He'd been the only person who ever pushed me to speak up when I didn't want to. A quiet man himself, he never demanded attention, but commanded respect. "Body, I saw the clip. I saw your face. I never stopped believing you'd speak. I just waited for the world to listen." I didn't cry. Instead, I closed my eyes, took a deeper breath than I had in weeks, and let it settle in my bones. I wasn't alone anymore. After another hour spent sipping slowly and staring out the window, I opened my text thread with Regina. It hadn't been active since the week before the party, when she'd sent a breezy one-liner asking if I could help her with the lighting setup since you're good at that visual stuff. I began typing. "We don't need to fix anything. There's nothing left broken on my end." I hovered over the send button. For a moment, I considered softening the tone, but I didn't. I hit send. Then I deleted the thread. Closure isn't what they owe you. It's what you grant yourself when the story ends. Outside, sunlight cut between buildings like a highlighter dragging across a page. I let it paint the walls, the table, my face. I packed a tote bag, sketch pads, charger, Jordan Vega's card. The rest of my life didn't need to start with fireworks or declarations. It just needed movement. No fanfare. No drama. Just forward. Today wasn't a new beginning. It was the first day without an ending to carry. I opened my phone to a headline that felt like wind clearing smoke. Whitmore Foundation halts event sponsorships after viral birthday scandal. My thumb hovered over the screen before scrolling. I felt no triumph in my chest, only calm. Sometimes justice isn't fury. It's the relief when lies collapse under their own weight. Cheryl had resigned from the board of a major charity, citing personal family matters, according to the press release buzzing in my feed. Regina's PR agency dropped her. Sponsorships evaporated. Influencer contracts disappeared overnight. The world I'd stepped into, just a memory of curated posts and gloss, fell apart without a sound. I didn't smile. I exhaled, softly, in my Brooklyn apartment flooded with morning light. My name wasn't in the headlines, only theirs crumbled. I flashed back to that moment at the party, late that night. Everyone had fled, the room hollowed out except for the hush that remained. Regina had lunged for the microphone to set the record straight. I'd stayed frozen under the spotlight, the buttons under my fingers cold, unmoved. Hope had flicked off the mic, intentionally. Regina's voice had echoed with desperation through the silent room, but no one listened. The spotlight lingered on me, bright, unblinking. I said nothing, and that silence traveled farther than any argument could have. Truth, when it speaks, doesn't need a voice. Sometimes it screams by refusing to dance to someone else's tune. I sat at my studio desk, early morning sunlight casting long shadows over paint-splattered tables and framed photographs. A plain envelope, postmarked by hand, lay waiting. I hesitated before opening it. No name, no return address, just my name, typed. Inside, a small photograph. Me at age 12, clumsy with a first camera, perched on a stool, head tilted, eyes bright. On the back, in my father's looping handwriting, "She sees what others miss." Tightness in my chest eased. That had been love, quiet, unseen love. He might never have said it in life, but he left it behind, in my studio, in that moment. Love doesn't always defend you out loud, but it leaves a map. I pinned the photo beside my current project board, a reminder of what I carry, not what I lost. Later that day, I walked into a local gallery. A few early patrons were sipping coffee, browsing artwork pinned just enough to draw attention without overwhelm. My photo series, titled Unedited, was on display. Unfiltered, unembellished images of life. Hands working, faded family portraits, daylight through curtains. People gathered, not just for the aesthetic, but for something more fragile and real, the story behind the images. One woman looked at me, eyes soft. "I watched your video," she said. "But this shows who you really are." I nodded, not from pride, but with certainty that rippled through me like sunlight breaking dark water. That's when I realized, this isn't about vindication anymore. It's about creating something lasting, something that doesn't just respond to their echoes, but shapes entirely new resonance. That night, I sat by the window, journal open. I wrote, "Vindication is for them, but legacy, that's for me." And I meant it. They used to talk over me. Now, I frame the silence.